had professional, non-political staffers with me, and we discussed some important international issues. Ambassadors were coming by to see me pretty often.
I think it's a big deal when you ask someone like the Attorney General to step down, but I found his explanation simply not credible. You don't, I think, treat a visit in your office by the Russian ambassador as something casual, something not memorable.
I don't think he had to do this, but I think he did what he thought was in the best interest of the Justice Department, which I think is fine. He was a surrogate for the campaign, and so I think he just wanted to err on the side of caution and remove any shred of doubt or concern whatsoever by doing that. So I think he kind of went above and beyond, and I think he should be touted for doing that.
The latest on the fallout from Attorney General Sessions recusing himself from any future investigations in this regard. The president weighing in today on Twitter. He said we should start an immediate investigation into Senator Schumer and his ties to Russia and Putin, a total hypocrite, showing a picture there of Schumer and Putin. Then he says, I hereby demand a second investigation after Schumer of Pelosi for her close ties to Russia and lying about it. Nancy Pelosi saying she never met with the Russian ambassador, and there he is at a table right across the table from the minority leader. Chuck Schumer responding, happy to talk regarding my contact with Mr. Putin and his associates. Took place in 2003 in full view of press and public. Under oath, would you and your team, question mark. That's the back and forth on that today. We have a lot to cover here in that Paul Ryan interview. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, senior editor. No, he's not senior editor. He is editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard. Mercedes Schlapp, columnist for the Washington Times. David Catanese, senior politics writer for U.S. News and World Report, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Okay, first let's just quickly deal with the Russia stuff and the developments. Is there a sense that this is moving one way or another, going somewhere?
I mean, it is absolutely fascinating to watch this unfold. On the one hand, I think there are real questions about the Trump campaigns or Trump world's handling of some of these questions. They haven't been as straightforward as they ought to have been in a number of different cases, including Donald Trump himself. On the other hand, could Democrats have played this any worse, immediately calling for resignations, immediately sort of jumping to conclusions for which we don't yet have evidence? I think Trump world should have to answer these questions, but Democrats are going to push and push and push in a way that makes any inquiries they make less credible.
David?
Sessions, at worst, lied before Congress, though, about communications. At best, he misremembered. That's what gave this story extra fire.
And didn't clean it up afterwards.
And didn't really clean it up. And it's hard for me, given that he knew Russia was going to be at the center, it's been at the center of the Trump administration since this election occurred, that he didn't know he was going to get that question and wasn't prepared for it. Maybe he misremembered it, but man, he gave the Democrats some firepower on this by not saying, yes, I did have a meeting, and that's perfectly normal. He could have said that. He didn't.
Mercedes, what about this other part of the story that is so fascinating? The lengths that the Obama administration went to, a June FISA request, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, gets shot down. The judge says no go to monitoring Trump Tower. They go back at it in October, and they do get a FISA request granted. There is wiretapping going on and monitoring of a computer that has some ties, they believe, to a Russian bank. By all accounts, they don't come up with anything in this investigation, but the investigation continues, and we don't know if it ever stopped.
Right, and it was supposed to be, let's focus on whether Russia is meddling in our elections. But it almost has a feel to it that it goes beyond. What are the connections between the Trump campaign and these Russian officials? And there is this continual sense, I think you're feeling, of the deep state, which is what they keep calling, of these intelligence insiders basically supporting, backing up President Obama, wanting to undermine President Trump's his presidency, and that is of a big concern. And this is why you're seeing these leaks coming out from these intelligence officials, and it's very troubling, Brett.
So listen, in the final weeks of his administration, here is a president who tried to narrow the scope of the NSA in the wake of Edward Snowden. But in the final weeks of his administration, he expands the NSA and the sharing with all of the intelligence agencies, and people are speculating that's because to get it out.
I don't think there's any question the president was intent, the former president, was intent on leaving behind landmines. And you're right, the NSA stuff is curious, Normally, when NSA is listening in on a foreigner, they take great care to redact any American involved. The NSA is not supposed to spy on Americans. Here it was the reverse, and there was an obvious attempt, as reported in the New York Times, to make sure this was spread as widely as possible, that it would become a problem for the Trump administration. I wouldn't call it the deep state. It gives it a le Carre feel that there's this ominous enemy of the United States hidden in the bureaucracy. What this is the revenge of the losers. These are people who wanted to make trouble for an administration of a guy who they thought wasn't going to win and shouldn't have won, and to see what happens. And that's what I think is going on. To some extent, it's happened in other administrations, but I think it's more obvious, and we're going to get to the bottom of it, because there are going to be a lot of investigations.
All right, down the road, does an independent counsel happen?
Yeah, unless there's another shoe dropping, no.
I don't think so.
No, I agree with that.
No.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
All right, Obamacare. Let's listen to Speaker Ryan on the rollout of Obamacare repeal and replace.
The Commerce Committee and the Ways and Means Committee are the two key committees in the House. They're running point on this in the House. They're working with their counterparts in the Senate and in the White House. When they're done with their fine-tuning, they'll make that announcement, and then they'll tell us when they're ready to go and move on the legislation. So they'll make that announcement pretty soon, I think. So what conservatives have long said is let's equalize the tax treatment for health care so that it doesn't matter whether you get health care at work or not at work, let's give you the same kind of tax benefit so that you can go buy what you want to buy. You go into a free market as a consumer and buy the plan of your choosing with the health savings accounts as well.
I'm told from our people up on Capitol Hill it's going to roll out on Monday and then start this rollout through next week. And he didn't like the question about transparency at all. I was quoting Republicans, but he really kind of pushed back on that.
I was shocked that he was that confident to your question about, hey, are you sure you're not going to lose 21 Republicans in the House? Look, the House Freedom Caucus members are sort of up in arms and on the Rand Paul, Ted Cruz side of this. Paul Ryan is dealing with the choice part of health care, but what the Rand Paul, Ted Cruz folks say is you're not dealing with the cost. You're using subsidies as a replacement. It's still taxpayer money. You're still creating an entitlement, and that is going to be the hurdle I think Paul Ryan has to get over with conservatives.
So the choice that they're saying is it's not Obamacare light, he's saying, but it is going to be either you choose to repeal and replace, or you're stuck with what we got.
Right. I think that's the way that Paul Ryan wants to frame it. What was so interesting for me in listening to that exchange, particularly the exchange about transparency, is this has long been something that Paul Ryan has argued. He's right when he says that he prefers to have the committees of jurisdiction take these issues and push them from the bottom up rather than the top down.
And I think they will.
I think he's right about that. I think actually Rand Paul and his other critics are wrong about that. I mean, this is something that I criticized Paul Ryan for when he first became Speaker on the issue of tax reform. I thought Republicans from leadership on down should have pushed a tax reform package, and he pushed back at me and said, no, 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 no. This all has to come from bottom up. That's the way he has played his speakership. It's consistent with what he's doing right now.
Mercedes?
Which is so different from what we saw back with Obamacare in the first place, which was Harry Reid pushing this bill for 6 days of debate during the Christmas deadline. I think what you're seeing within the Republicans right now is this division into two camps, where you have Trump, Ryan, McConnell together, deadlock, lockstep, and then you have obviously Ryan and the Freedom Caucus, Paul, Cruz, Lee, and the Freedom Caucus that are saying we got to do this 2015 full repeal and nothing else. And that, I think, is going to be the sticking point. If they lose those Republicans in the Senate, those 3 Republicans, they can't push this through. They'll have to.
The biggest question is, how do you keep these insurance companies in the fold? Because they're all going to bolt this year because they're losing hundreds of millions of dollars.
It's going to have to be taxpayer money. And as for the Freedom Caucus, it's the Harikiri Caucus. Obamacare created an entitlement. It brought in about 20 million people. You cannot cut it off and expect that you're not going to have a revolt from sea to shining sea. They have to have some substitute. I think the way to do it is with a tax credit, but the idea that you can do a pure a revision of that, an abolition of that overnight is insane, and the whole Obamacare opposition would collapse. They need to be realistic and listen to Paul Ryan.